LaMelo Ball's been on a hot streak lately. We'll talk about what exactly he means to this team, and it's time to bring it on out. We're going to talk about the NBA Draft Lottery Simulator. Can we get the number one overall pick? We're going to find out next. Locked On Hornets.
We're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen, and we're free and available anywhere you get your podcast. That includes YouTube, by the way. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On. I'm Walker Mayo. Find me on WFNZ from 12 to 3, and that's Doug Branson. You can find his substack, Every Hornets Boxscore, on everyhornetsboxscore.com. LaMelo Ball, Doug, it's the reason we're watching. He's the franchise. He's been a lot of fun, and we just had the question in this game against Hawks, whether that was a performance that would rank in the top 5, the top 3. Do we dare say it was the best performance of all time as far as LaMelo's NBA career is concerned? But really, we're going to do this first segment to celebrate what LaMelo Ball is, because there's not a lot to celebrate right now in Hornets land. Yet LaMelo is a reason. Doug, what have you seen from LaMelo here recently that has allowed him to go on this stretch where we've seen him perform extremely well, flirt with triple doubles, score 30, give you 15 assists? What have you seen here recently? Is there a change, or is he just starting to hit shots and it's as simple as that?
Yeah, let's talk about those numbers. I mean, he had the 30-point game, obviously, 15 assists against Atlanta, but he had 33 as well. Over the last 5 games, he's averaging 24 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds, and over a steal a game. He has double-digit assists in his last 3 games. And I think this is one of the more important stats. He has 6+ rebounds in every single game since his return from injury. And Walker, I think it's as simple as this. We're seeing the old LaMelo. And that's silly to say because he's such a young player to see the old LaMelo. But it's the LaMelo Ball that we were used to seeing last season when they were racking up wins, and a lot of it had to do with LaMelo Ball. I think it's as simple as, he's weathered some of these injuries. He looks a lot healthier. Remember when he first came back and he was messing with his wrist a lot? He didn't look right, in terms of just the way he was getting up and down the court. His ankles, we know, have been an issue. I just think whatever they're doing and the training staff, they've got him into a better place than when he first came back from this latest injury stint.
Yeah, I do too. And I think with LaMelo, of course he's hitting more shots right now. But also, I'm going to give you a taste of your own medicine here, going to Cleaning the Glass, which is your site. Just looking at his stats, you see the assist percentage. It's been fantastic just for him individually. But if you look at just the way the team is affected offensively with him on the floor and without him on the floor, Doug, it's night and day. It is hard to watch without LaMelo running things. And if you look at the effective field goal percentage for this team, when he's on the floor, they're 4.3% better in the effective field goal percentage department. That ranks in the 97th percentile with him being on the floor, right? So you're talking about LaMelo having that kind of impact for you offensively. The difference there is monumental when he's not playing for you. The turnover percentage, right? You're talking about him, also being able to take care of the basketball with this team with that kind of passing, which is interesting. At least the offense does. The offense actually takes care of the basketball, which we've seen in Steve Clifford sets before. But you would think maybe you'd have a higher turnover rate in the Steve Clifford offense with LaMelo at the helm, but they're actually taking care of it quite a bit. And so, as far as the team is concerned, I've been impressed with just his effect on the winning part of the offense, right? A team that desperately needs him, a team that can't have Terry Rozier run point guard, a team that has been without Gordon Hayward, and LaMelo, when he's on, he makes such a big difference, and we're seeing that quite a bit right now.
Yeah, I wonder too, Walker, how much of it is the circumstances around the team. Now that we are past the trade deadline, now that we are past, I think, any sort of illusions about what this team can be and any kind of, miracle postseason run or miracle back half of the season run that could get them to the postseason. Like, all of that's gone now. And it doesn't have to mean that a team now isn't focused on winning. I think this team is very focused on winning basketball games, but I don't think they're so much focused on like what the end result. I think now they're playing a lot freer. They can focus on just playing better basketball together, because that's going to have benefits for them in the coming seasons. And so I think that there has to be something to that they just view the season differently. Everyone looks like they're having a little bit more fun out there, even when they're losing basketball games to the Celtics and the Nuggets. It just they look a lot freer. So I think that's part of it. I don't know if you think that's valid at all.
No, I do. Yeah, I definitely think that's valid. I do think they look a lot more free, but LaMelo allows them to do that. He's going to find guys in better situations as well. And so 100%, I do think as you're starting to dwindle down here, I 100% think that is the case for this team. And final question before we move on to the next segment, how important do you think this final stretch is for LaMelo specifically, right? Because if you are Team Wemby, you want him to lose, but just individually, how important is this going to be for the franchise player?
I mean, yeah, you want them. I don't even think you want them to lose. This is going to sound crazy. I think you want other teams like the Magic and the Pacers. You don't want them to lose a ton and like compete for the Hornets for that like 4th or 5th spot. But I mean, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the next segment when we do a standings check. Mm-hmm. But I just look at the rosters for the Rockets, the Spurs, who they play tonight. They've ripped that roster apart. Detroit, they're doing all kinds of tanking shenanigans. I just don't think that's in the Hornets as an organization to do those kind of shenanigans. And I think the roster that the Hornets have is just legitimately more talented than the teams right now that they're slightly ahead of in the standings. So from that perspective, I just kind of want to see LaMelo play well. I want to see him develop a relationship with Mark Williams. And if they're getting the doors blown off every night, sure, you get a Wemby sweepstakes, but you also really, I think, lose a little bit of future prospects for your team because it means LaMelo isn't playing well. It means that relationship isn't being established. So honestly, I would rather see those things happen and then win a few more ball games that maybe puts them, again, at 4th, because I don't think that they're going to catch the Magic or the Pacers. So I'd rather see those things happen in the back half. I think this is an extremely important stretch for him because LaMelo had goals coming into this season that he wasn't really ever able to establish enough rhythm before getting injured again to really go after any of those goals. I would like to see him in this final stretch get to the rim a little bit more and get fouled. He's got to start forcing these referees to make calls, and the way you do that is consistently get to the rim, take contact. Maybe you don't get a call here and there, but you got to show these refs that you're serious about getting to the rim and drawing contact. So I want to see that. And again, you don't see that if you're not focused on winning, if you're not completely focused on playing well every single night. And I don't think that's in LaMelo either. He gets on the floor, he's focused on winning basketball games.
Yeah, I don't want them to look like dog bleep either, right? Like, I want them to actually compete for sure. But at the same time, I'm looking for individual things like the LaMelo-Mark Williams connection. If PJ is going to be a part of this team, then can you continue to have a LaMelo-PJ combination that works well out there on the floor? Bryce McGowan's, how does he look, especially with the lead point guard, but also coming off of the bench? Just whatever your future is going to be, whoever you're going to decide to invest in. Honestly, Doug, I mean, even Terry Rozier, I wonder if he is going to be a part of this team next season and the year after that, if they're just not going to trade him, you start to try to figure out, all right, who's important for some kind of foundation. And then that's who I'm pulling for. That's what I'm wanting to see. Not that I'm pulling against anybody on this squad, but if it leads to L's, okay. I don't want this to be a team that constantly gets beat, by 30. I definitely don't want that. But this is also a squad that just lost 7 in a row before they were able to get this victory against the Hawks, and they almost blew it. So you're right. Spurs, they are losing at a fantastic pace right now. They've lost 13 straight coming into tonight's game. Detroit, they're 3-7 in their last 10. That's like the Hornets are. You look at the Houston Rockets, I believe they're 2-8 in their last 10. Yeah, that's right. They're on a 6-game losing streak. So I think they'll always be within reach of getting to that last 3 spot in the standings. But ultimately, I do think you're right, too. They're not passing Orlando or catching up to them. Indiana, they're not going to catch up to either. and the Lakers, it's hard to see that happening as well. So, yeah, we'll do another standings check coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Let's bring out the draft lottery simulator, check on the standings, dive a little bit deeper into that, and see if we can get the Hornets the number 1 overall pick, but also just talk about some of the scenarios if they don't get that number 1 overall selection. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a fantasy app where you can pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available, and they have projections on any sport you watch. That includes the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, men's and women's college basketball, soccer, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, so many more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. You have safe and fast withdrawals, and you can currently operate this app in over 30 states and even Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com, and you can sign up today and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On and sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. More on Locked On Hornets coming up next. All right, Doug, checking out the standings. Charlotte, they're 14th out of 15 teams in the East. They only sit above the Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference. Hornets are 16 and 43. Detroit, 15 and 43. So they are only a half game up on Detroit. Now, as I was talking about Orlando and Indiana, we both agree that they're not going to be able to catch them. Orlando is currently 24 and 35. So they are, what is that? That is about 8 games ahead. They are 8 games ahead of Charlotte. And then Indiana is 9 games ahead of Charlotte. That's a lot going down the stretch. So I don't think they're going to catch them. What do you make of the Hornets' placement in the standings right now? And just kind of how you would feel if they were the 4th team, right? Where you don't get one of the 3 highest odds to get that number 1 overall selection. You'd be cool with getting the 4th highest odds, but like 2nd compared to the 14% that you get if you're 1 through 3, if that makes sense.
There's a lot of numbers you just threw at me. I stopped taking math in college for a reason, Walker. Here's what I think about the standings. I think that what the Pistons, the Spurs, and the Rockets are doing is absolutely shameful. It's shameless. They have no shame in their tanking. And you know what? I wish my organization felt the same way. But they don't. And that's really kind of the reality piece of this, right? The Hornets had the opportunity to, if they were willing to take back, I think, some less valuable longer term contracts, bad money, less value than they think that certain players are worth. If they were willing to rip this whole thing to shreds at the trade deadline, I really think the Hornets could have done that. But they decided not to, because I really feel like Mitch Kupchak and company, I think they can sort of ride this gap and have a decent enough odds at getting Wemby or Scoot or even Brandon Miller at 3, and then you have a good piece to build with, and you're going to be bringing back some veterans that have played together for a long time. I think they can turn that. They think they can turn that thing into a possible, playoff first round bid, even as soon as next season. So that's the reality. And look, they haven't done enough to make this team that bad. So I think you want to see them perform well at this point. And I don't think, unless the danger, Walker, really is that Orlando or Indiana suffers a major injury or multiple injuries, because I don't think either of those teams are going to pull crazy shenanigans in the back half to try to get into that 4th slot, although crazier things have happened. But yeah, I mean, if Paolo Banchero goes down for Orlando, then it's not so crazy if the Hornets stay healthy that they could slide to 5. That would be the nightmare scenario.
Well, and the Charlotte Hornets have been as unhealthy as any team this season, so it would take a lot to be unhealthier than the Charlotte Hornets. So I don't know how much Gordon Hayward is going to play the rest of the way, I don't know when Kelly Oubre is going to come back. I don't know if they would flip-flop, because that seems to be the rule of the Hornets this year. If you get a guy back, then you have to lose someone. You have to have a sacrifice. It was Dennis Smith Jr. and LaMelo. Snip, snap, snip, snap. That happened a couple times, and we'll see if it happens as you start to get some of these other guys back. I don't even know if Cody Martin is going to come back, Doug. So, yeah, what kind of impact does that have?
Well, I wouldn't bring him back, unless he was 100% healthy. If there's any question about his health at this point, I think you just hold on and say, look, lost season for Cody Martin. We're going to get him 100% healthy, restart the whole thing. You lose a contract year. Okay, well, things happen. But luckily it's not something, I think, like a broken leg or something where you're going, oh, man, is this possibly career ending? I haven't heard that kind of conversation around Cody Martin's injury. It just seems like one of these nagging things that has been tough to really pin down and fully get healthy. So, I think you shut that down. And Gordon Hayward really is sort of the hinge piece of, at what point does load management become, okay, let's look at Bryce McGowan's in the starting lineup for a few games. Let's, when Kelly gets back, let's give Kelly a little bit more action to see what they have there and whether they want to retain his services next season. So I think all of those options are on the table, but I don't think those happen right after the All-Star break. I think that's things you're maneuvering, in late March, early April kind of thing when you're on your last couple of games. But I'm ready to look at this Tankathon, baby. I'm ready to roll the dice and look and see where the Hornets end up. Are you ready?
Yes, I am. So I did this on WFNZ, and I did it 5 times total. It took me 3 times spinning the old wheel to get the number 1 overall pick, but I did get the number 1 overall pick 2 out of the 5 times that I spun it.
Wow.
So decent odds and decent
Luck
happenings
be a Walker.
when I went. If they want me to come in and be a part of the lottery ball process and be the witness, I would love to do so. We'll see what happens on Locked On Hornets, though. All right, let's give that thing a spin, Doug.
I'd be smuggling Hornets ping pong balls in my pants.
It'd be like the old logo that's not even in use anymore, and then it'd be obvious.
What's going on here? Is there a Bobcats ball in here? How'd that get in here? Okay, here we go. Are you ready to hit the sim lottery button and see where the Hornets end up? And then we can look and see who they would, pick in their mock draft. And fire. Here we go. Beep, boop, 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 boop. Oh no!
I mean, it's demoralizing. Pain.
Oh, well, see, I hit
pain.
the button. I'm the bad luck charm, I guess. Yeah, they fall to 6th.
Doug,
Hold
on.
What?
Let's talk about what would happen if that actually did take place. I mean, I know. Logical minds are going to come in and they're going to say this is a deep draft, and I can hear Nada mad at me already. I can hear Nada. I'm sorry, Nada. I'm sorry, but I'm telling you now, if we have to go through this, and then we get the 6th overall pick, I mean, that's hard to have this type of season that is a throwaway, and to have the 6th overall selection. You might end up with a great player. That might be true. But the 6th overall selection, that'd be tough. I'm just telling you, that would be tough to stomach. All right.
Well, let's tell people what happened. So Washington jumped up 8 spots, 4.5% overall percentage to get the number 1 overall pick. They jumped 8 spots. Orlando jumped 3 spots to number 2. And then all 4 of the teams that are at the bottom of the NBA right now dropped several spots, except for San Antonio. They only dropped 1 spot. But yeah, Charlotte drops 2 spots. By the way, right now, they have a 12.5% chance of the number 1 overall pick. That's only slightly less than if they were in the bottom 3. That's a 14% chance. And they would have essentially a coin flip at the top 4, 48%. But they lose both of those opportunities in this sim. They go to 6. So let's look at the mock draft. So Tankathon has Victor going 1, Scoot going 2, Brandon Miller going 3, then followed by the Thompson twins, Amen and Asar, going 4, 5. And then 6th, and this is interesting, Nick Smith Jr., Arkansas, point guard, shooting guard, combo guard, 6'5", 185 pounds. But Walker, tell us about Nick Smith Jr. He hasn't played in a while, right?
Oh, well, no, look, you put me on the spot. I have not done a whole lot of NBA draft lottery conversation stuff. I do know Nick Smith coming into this college basketball season. If you were to look at mock drafts, the way too early mock drafts, everybody had Wemby 1, everybody had Scoot 2. Nick Smith was kind of that third guy for the most part. Now you are talking about a Brandon Miller who has been awesome for Alabama this season. He started to jump up. I know Cam Whitmore was kind of in the mix, and because of some, I think, injuries that he's battled, I think at the beginning of the season, maybe some struggles, he's kind of bounced back. Again, if I'm getting some of this wrong, I apologize. I've not done my NBA draft research yet, but I will say Nick Smith was the guy that seemed to be that number 3 piece right after Wemby and Scoot when we jumped into the college basketball season.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I'll just tell you, he hasn't played in a while. He's out indefinitely right now for Arkansas. I think, played 5 games. I'm looking at the game log here, and there's 3 games here between December 3rd and 10th that look really good. High minutes, and 6 of 14, 6 of 14, 8 of 16. Big part of Arkansas's offense. Efficient, 22 points on December 6th, 21 points. So he can score. There's no doubt about that. Assist numbers, again, small sample size, right? Because we just don't know enough from this particular season for Nick Smith, and he's a freshman. So this was, going to be what we're going to see, because I think he's going to enter the draft regardless of whether he comes back for Arkansas or not. But I think if you get 6th, if the Hornets drop, if they're in that 4th slot going into the lottery and they drop 2 slots, I know there's a lot of Cam Whitmore fans out there. I know Nada's a big Cam Whitmore fan, but to me, this feels like, the first 2 tiers, right? I think it's Victor tier 1, and I think maybe it's 3 tiers. Victor tier 1, maybe Scoot and Brandon tier 2, because I feel like Brandon's going to challenge Scoot a little bit for that 2 spot. There's going to be a lot of smoke around that 2 spot if Brandon Miller keeps this level of play up. And then I think the 3rd tier is the Thompson twins, and below that is everybody else. So I really feel like the top 5, if you don't land in that top 5, you're going to feel super disappointed in this draft.
Well, yeah, just kind of looking at the age right now, the Thompson twins are both 20 years old, and then you have Brandon Miller at 20, and then you go down.
That'd be
to
weird
Nick.
if one of them was. So the twins.
That's correct.
If one of them was, we have to figure out which one came out first, right? I mean, one has to be slightly older than the other, and I think we should take that into account when we're talking about their draft stock.
Yeah, one is clearly more mature than the other one, 100%. But yeah, so I'm trying to look at the age if that's any different whatsoever, and you are talking about some younger guys if you go a little bit further down. But
Nick Smith, Nick Smith 19. You've got Brandon Miller, the Thompson twins at 20. Scoot's 19. Victor's 19. I mean, it's all 19-year-olds. Really, the Thompson twins are the sort of outlier. They've been playing an overtime elite. They are the 20-year-olds, the mature twins here. But look, man, I think if they landed at 5, I was hoping in that lottery that they landed at 5, because the more I look at Ausar, I think teams are going to look at Amen and go, man, explosive athlete, doesn't get more explosive than that. Got to have that offensive presence. But Ausar to me seems like the better two-way player. Defense, you need that defense on the wing if you're Charlotte. I'd love Ausar, honestly, if they don't win the Victor Scoot sweepstakes.
So it seems like you're coming around on, all right, if we don't get number 1 overall pick, it's okay.
Seems like I've spent day and night studying these prospects because I'm getting into draft mode, baby.
You are. You're absolutely getting into draft mode. I should be. It's what we're playing for now, so I should be getting there. All right, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Let's talk a little about this game, a game that does feature 2 teams in the Wemby sweepstakes. The Hornets will play the Spurs tonight, and a certain former Hornet now plays for San Antonio. We'll dive into that a little bit as well coming up next segment. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and the calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. Built Bars are so good, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they're healthy. That's why Built Bars is something you absolutely need to try. They are unbelievable flavors that they offer: churro, peanut butter brownie, all of the coconut variations. Those are fantastic. I'm not sure how they do it, but I don't want you to just settle for a 4-bar box if you want more. You can get that 4-bar box. You can go to Walmart, and then you can get the box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puffs, whatever. But if you want more than that, and if you're close to a Sam's Club, you can run in there and get a 13-bar box with their new hit flavors as well. Brownie batter, I mentioned churro already. They're so good. Low fat, low calories, low sugar, but high in protein, high in fiber. Go to Sam's Club, go to Walmart, go to Built.com. Plenty of ways that you can get one of those delicious Built Bars. All right, one more segment to go. Coming up next, Locked On Hornets. I told you the Spurs have been losing with the best of them recently. They've lost 13 straight. They're 14-44 overall. They're 5-23 on the road.
Ouch.
All of that mounts up to the Hornets being a pretty big favorite, Doug. I don't know if you've seen the line for this game. Have you seen it already?
Well, what's the FanDuel line? Our friends at FanDuel, what do they have it?
Well, the FanDuel line, I don't have that in front of me. I just clicked on the ESPN. Yeah, go ahead and look that up. But thank you for doing that. I apologize to FanDuel. 7-point favorites is what I have for the Hornets right now.
Honestly, I expected it to be double digit. Yeah, FanDuel has it as 7 as well.
So is that the biggest? Is that the biggest favorite they've been so far this year? It's got to be close, right? To be a 7-point
I can actually
favorite.
look this up. I can actually, because I've been keeping track of how Vegas is dealing with the Hornets, so I can actually give you a decent answer here if you give me one second.
I will give you 1 second. We can talk a little bit more about the Spurs. I mean, they've been losing a lot, right? They're on a road trip actually right now. And so it started against Chicago. They lost to Chicago, Toronto, Detroit, Atlanta, Cleveland, now Charlotte. So this has been a really long road trip for them. They also had a 3-game road trip against Portland, LA, both the LA teams there, and they lost all of those. So they are fantastic right now. They are the team in the driver's seat, I would say, when it comes to possibly landing Victor Wembanyama. The Hornets have dropped some of these games. We can talk about them against the Detroit Pistons. We've seen that a couple of times already. So that's a losing Spurs team. It's going to be tough, Doug. All right, what did you get as far as
that was some quality. You are the radio professional, my friend.
No,
that
was really bad, to be honest with you, but go ahead.
That was some high quality. Okay, I can kind of answer this question.
Okay.
The reason I say kind of is because I could look up the line that they had against Houston, because that's going to contend for sure. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that apart from that Houston game that I don't have the line for right now, this would be the highest favorite that they would be since the Detroit game back on December 14th, that LaMelo return game that they lost in overtime when LaMelo fouled out. They also were 4.5-point favorites against Philadelphia back on November 23rd. If you remember that game, no James Harden, no Embiid, no Maxey. It was just, they did win that game 107-101, but Vegas obviously taking into account the fact that Philly had no one. So unless that, I'll take a look at that Houston game in just a moment, but unless that one competes, I think this is going to be the biggest favorite. And look, it makes sense, right? San Antonio, did you read, I wasn't listening because I was looking up the research. Did you read the blurb that I had from Pounding the Rock, which is the San Antonio blog?
I did not read that. I did mention the Detroit game, though, how we've seen the Hornets lose this type of contest before, but that was it. I have not read the blurb.
All right, so I got this blurb here from Pounding the Rock, which is a San Antonio blog, San Antonio Spurs blog. A loss tonight for San Antonio would set the mark for the worst losing streak in Spurs franchise history. In the 50-year history of the Spurs, they've only ever gone on double-digit losing streaks, what feels like an impossible 4 times in 50 years, with 2 of those coming this season. The current mark of 13 matches the losing streak that the 1989 team endured the year before they were joined by David Robinson.
There you go.
History tonight. And I feel like what we just did there, Walker, you know what we just did? We just spoiled some solid Eric Collins material that people are going to hear regurgitated on Bally Sports
Eric.
tonight.
Whoops. Here is something that is a little interesting, too. If you cared about the pre-draft process at all, this past NBA selection process, you can see some of the guys here on the Spurs, right? Blake Wesley is playing for the Spurs right now. I know a lot of people liked him coming out of Notre Dame. Malachi Branham was one of my favorites. It was Jalen Williams. It was Malachi Branham I really liked. And Malachi's been starting to play really well recently. And so not so much the first stint, the first few months of the season. But if you look at the month of February, the last 7 games or so, he's averaging 17 points, almost 50% from the field, and he is shooting 40% from 3. No Devin Vassell, another draft favorite of mine. You do have Keldon Johnson playing pretty well this season. But here's the thing about San Antonio, Doug. There's a lot of bad defensive teams out there. They're all towards the bottom of their standings. Charlotte, Houston, the Spurs. San Antonio is the worst. they are allowing 122 points per game to opponents. And I think that is 3 points worse on a per game basis than Houston and Charlotte. And if you look at some of the guys that are considered the worst defensive players in the league by some advanced stats that you might research, it's a lot of Spurs that are up there. Malachi Branham is one. He might have been the worst overall defensive player in the NBA last time I checked, but there are some other guys that are up there. So Hornets are already coming off a near 150-point performance. Could they do it again against the worst team who is awful on the road? Could they do it at home against the worst defensive team? So that's something to watch for as well.
Yeah, Spurs don't have a lot of talent, and they're missing a ton of players. You mentioned Vassell. They're also going to be without Romeo Langford, Doug McDermott, Kim Birch, Trey Jones, Isaiah Roby. Like, their injury list is extremely long, and I'm sure they're not going to be rushing many of those players back. So, yeah, this is an opportunity for the Hornets to close strong. And I know, look, this team has got to be looking forward to getting a rest. So hopefully they're not looking too far forward to that rest. They won't have to do anything for the All-Star game. I don't know if you feel like that benefits the team or not. Honestly, I do. I think this team could use a rest. This team could use a reset. And they do, you don't have players having to have commitments over the All-Star break unless they want to. So I think that's actually a positive for the team.
Yeah, I mean, unless you want LaMelo in the skills challenge or something like that. But other than that, I mean, it's going to be a rest for a lot of Hornets who are not going to participate in All-Star festivities. All right, go ahead. You got
did
one
you
other thing?
Did you mention Devontae Graham plays for the Spurs?
No, I did not. I was going to say, yeah, Devontae Graham does play for San Antonio. He was traded right at the deadline. I forget what the trade involved. I think maybe multiple second-round picks because every trade did. But Devontae is now playing for the Spurs. He did play the other night in this box score against Cleveland where they lost 117-109. You did have
That's
Devontae.
Interesting, Walker. That's interesting because do you feel like the Hornets are vindicated a little bit? Because I know it wasn't like a vast majority of fans, but there was a contingent that really wanted to retain Devontae Graham after some of the amazing performances that he put on several years ago for the Hornets. They let him go. New Orleans signs him. And now they've disavowed Graham. They said that didn't work.
Yeah, no, they're validated. And I was wrong on this. Like I wanted them to invest in Devontae when you had that extension conversation surrounding him. And there had been so few good things to happen to Charlotte. I thought Devontae and LaMelo, defensively, it would be kind of rough. It would be really rough. But I did want to pay the $13 million for Devontae. And the first round pick, if you get a first round pick, this is what I said. I always thought that was worthwhile. I just thought they were going to be a worse passing team because I did value Devontae. He didn't turn the ball over. I still trusted his shooting at the time. And they decided to trade him for a lottery protected pick. They barely got that selection, right? It just fell outside of the lottery process, and they were able to get Mark Williams with that selection. So it worked. And they're absolutely vindicated in it. And so, yeah, that was something where even if I valued the first round pick, I would have been wrong to retain Devontae. And so now he gets traded again. Yeah. So a little bit
I
of a
can't
fall
believe
here.
I didn't bring this up during our multiple Jalen McDaniels arguments. But don't you? I mean, I feel like you have to trust. There's a lot of things that I'm not sure that I trust Mitch Kupchak on at this point. But one thing that I do trust is his evaluation of the second round selections, both making them, getting value for them in terms of the contribution they can make for the Hornets, but also knowing when to cut ties and say, all right, we got some value here. Now we're going to move on. And they did that with Devontae Graham. They're validated. And yet you don't trust that that's going to happen with Jalen McDaniels.
Are you? So I just want to get this straight just real quickly. You're telling me that we had a shot to end the show today. We had that shot. We did. And what you wanted to do was say, hold on, did you tell the people about Devontae? And then you wanted to use that extra time to resurrect the Jalen McDaniels conversation that you will not leave me alone on at all. Whether it be group chat with David Walker, whether it be bringing him on, whether it be at the end of the show, you will not leave me alone on Jalen. I didn't bring him up. That's 2 days in a row. We could have ended the show. And you wanted to bring up Jalen again? Look, if you want to do the Jalen thing, let's do it, okay? If you want to do the Jalen thing, Devontae and Jalen, I was wrong on Devontae, even if you trade him for a first rounder. I did say if you'd get a first rounder for Jalen, then I got it, right? Like a lottery protected or a little bit more, that'd be just fine with me. Yep. The thing about Jalen too is I was listening to Zach Lowe and other people talk about it as well. One thing I did not put enough to this potential trade was that he's good and he's going to leave in unrestricted free agency for another team. And so I wouldn't imagine them giving up a whole lot of assets because of that, not because they don't value Jalen. Look, man, if you go to cleaning the glass as well, his on-off numbers help this team defensively every single year. He makes this team better defensively, close to the top third. He's right at that 66 percentile as far as the difference when he helps defensively. I value defense. I don't think he would cost a Devontae Graham contract and what he got. Like, what was it, $14 million for New Orleans? I think it'd be something like 10. Big wing, shot 38% from three last year. Even if it was down at 32, it really started at the month January. And then if you go before that, in a role where I thought kind of a little bit better suited, you're talking about Jalen McDaniels shooting 36% from three, 46% overall. Like, I just think defensively is something I valued a lot from Jalen, where you could put him in, whether it be off the bench or start, and be really malleable within the offense and the defense. That's why I didn't want to trade him, right? Like Devontae, that's one where it's a little bit more risky. He would have had a bigger role than what Jalen would in this idea. But you got a first round pick. Like, that's hard to argue with, right? Like, here with Jalen, you're talking about netting 1 second round pick. And the benefit is, okay, now we don't have to worry about losing him for nothing. Okay, but now you got a second round pick, which is great. I would just rather take that risk of signing the guy that will fit into whatever situation you want and then keep him long term. The shooting numbers, they went down since January. There's no doubt about it. And if you just don't think he's a good 3-point shooter and you don't think it's going to come back, that's fine. I believe in it a little bit more. But yeah, that's why I wasn't a fan of Jalen. And I still think there was a lot of room, and he's played pretty damn well for Philly the last 2 games. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes later on.
The Rockets were a 3-point favorites. So this said that, this would be their biggest favorite. What were you talking about?
Yeah, Jalen McDaniels. But again, let's go to the end of the show right now. Thanks for making us your first listen today. Now make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Have a great rest of your day. We will be back with you tomorrow, and I refuse to talk Jalen McDaniels.
And I refuse to let you refuse.
Yeah.